Hi there guys, Ken here, your thrifty apprentice, and today we are going to be taking a look at a very economical product. I am speaking of Master's Touch Fine Art Studio complete 48 color range of watercolor pencils. Now, in case you don't know, I'll fill you in a little bit. Master's Touch Fine Art Studio is the housecraft brand for Hobby Lobby alongside their Fine Art Studio brand. Now, I have done a review on the Master's Touch Fine Art Studio versus the Fine Touch watercolor paints on the channel, and I will be sure to put a link for that video in this video description in case you guys are interested in going and checking out the review on those paints. So right off here, again, this is the complete 48 color set because this is the number that's in the complete range. It comes in a very sturdy tin, guys. I was actually pretty impressed at how sturdy this tin was for it to be a craft brand. As sturdy as some of the more professional brands that I've seen. Master's Touch Fine Art Studio, 48 colors, watercolor pencils, includes brush, says that they're artist grade, highly pigmented with a smooth laydown. They're pre-sharpened with a 3.3 millimeter core. You can use them wet or dry, and I tell you guys that all the time about watercolor pencils, especially if they won't smudge. And of course, by them being watercolor pencils, they are water soluble. There's a complete color chart here, but it doesn't really tell you any color names or anything like that. There's some really nice pencil work over to the right side of the front of the tin. When you flip it over on the back, again, Master's Touch Fine Art Studio 48 colors. Here on the back, they give you a full color swatch, including the names for each color. And it's actually a good thing that they did that, and we'll talk about why in just a moment. It conforms to the ASTM D4236 regulations, and it says Master's Touch is copyrighted 2010, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And then, of course, it lets you know that they are made in China, and it gives you the Hobby Lobby website in order for you to be able to order the watercolor pencils from. So let's go ahead and take a look at the pencils themselves. So let me slide this to the side for a minute here. And hopefully that's in frame enough for you guys to be able to see. Let me check. Okay, so this is how the pencils look when they are originally opened. There is a plastic sheet covering the pencils, which is taped down, and I just untaped it. And the top of the lid, again, they have the color swatches along with the color names, both on the back of the tin and in the top of the tin lid. When you remove the plastic, you get 2 trays, 48 pencils that are arranged in a colored spectrum order. It's not normally the order that I would necessarily arrange my products in, but it is arranged in the spectrum order as it's listed on the color swatch on the top of the tin or the back of the tin. So that's actually a good thing. The brush is included on the top tray. And that is definitely a synthetic brush. I have not tried it out, but it is a number 6 round. And here's what I do know. I actually have 2 other Master Touch watercolor brushes, and for all intents purposes, they are my go-to brushes. I actually love them. Both of them are synthetic. One is a number 10 round, and one is like a number 5 or 6 filbert. And I actually love those brushes and use them a lot. I did not test this brush out, but if the other brushes are any indication, then this is going to be a good brush, unless it's just like a throwaway brush that they're putting in the pack. Now, the tray that the pencils is held in actually is not as flimsy as some other trays that I've seen with watercolor pencils. Actually, I think that's kind of sturdy, and it does hold the pencils really well. And again, you'll get 2 trays. And if you decided that you did not want to keep the pencils in the tin, you could store something else in there, or you could actually take the trays out, put the pencils in there, which would make more room for you to put other pencils to store in there. So that's all of the packaging. Now let's look at the barrels of the pencils themselves. I'm just going to slide this up a little here. And I'll just grab this one here. Now, looking at the barrels, they all have the standard gold on the top part of the barrel, with the gray color band, and then the color swatch for supposedly matching the lid. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. On the top, it has a little brush to let you know that this is a watercolor pencil, and the Master's Touch logo. There is no other information on the pencil barrel. It is that straightforward and simple. However, they are arranged in order based on the swatches in the top of the tin, in the back of the tin. So if you leave them in that order, you can swatch them out that way, and you'll be able to know what colors go where. Now, what I did, because there aren't any color names printed on the barrels, after I swatched them out and wrote the color names for each color in, I then, leaving the pencils in order, numbered them 1 through 48, and wrote the corresponding number on the color swatch. That way, if I'm not looking here, or I have a few pencils out, I'm looking at my swatch sheet, I can match the name of each color up based on the number. And I'll show you guys that when we look at the swatch sheet. And that's pretty much the barrel, straightforward. Again, not much information on it at all. I will go ahead and say there is no light fast information included on the packaging. There's no light fast information included on the barrels of the pencils. There is no light fast information included on Hobby Lobby's website about the pencils. The only thing that it says is that they are artist grade, which I definitely take with a grain of salt, because I am pretty aware of the fact that most of Master's Touch products are student grade at best. Definitely not artist grade. Not even on the lower spectrum of artist grade, but definitely a good student grade brand of product. And in all honesty, Master's Touch is becoming one of my go-to sort of favorite craft brands, because for all intents and purposes, all of the products that I've used from them, the paper, the brushes, the paints, have been of pretty decent quality. And now let's go ahead and talk about these pencils. So let's just take a look at the color swatch sheet here. All right, so here we have the swatch sheet for the Master's Touch Fine Art Studio pencils. And here you'll see where I left them in order. I swatched them out, I wrote the name, and then I wrote the corresponding number, so I'll always be able to match a name with the color. And yeah, you might not want to put that much work into labeling or identifying a pencil. You may want to just eye it and do it by, you may just want to eye it and do it that way if that's your choice. But I just wanted to do this for my reference and to be able to show you guys how you can label the pencils. So I swatched each pencil out, and then the very first layer, I completely dispersed the pencils with water. And then as you will see here in the top left corner, there is a darker swatch from where I actually glazed a second layer of the pencils on top of the water layer without adding water, just to see how the pencils would perform themselves as just a dry colored pencil. For all intents and purposes, the layering and the glazing went well. I'll tell you now, I really think that the pencils layer in or glaze pretty well. I had no qualms with that at all. The lid itself is sort of semi-soft, and of course most watercolor pencils do have a bit of a scratchy lid, but this one I didn't hear much scratch with. The lid it's not super soft, but it's not hard and scratchy either. Now they work pretty well on most water media papers, and we're going to take a look at it. Now, you guys know that I primarily use mixed media paper and watercolor paper, which I think are the two predominant papers you do most water-soluble paintings on. So I definitely wanted to test the pencils on both of those type of papers, so there would be some experience in order to actually offer an opinion. Let's see. The lids do not break easily. I was able to apply moderate too heavy pressure without ever breaking the lid, as I've used them over the few paintings that I've done. Now, typically I do anywhere from 3, 4, maybe 5 paintings before I do a review, but honestly, I only did 3 with these pencils. I felt at that point it was enough experience for me to be able to offer my opinion. With that being said, do keep in mind, of course, everything said is completely my opinion based on my experience. I'm not paid, and these videos are not sponsored in any shape, form, or fashion. And this is just my experience with the pencils that I'm offering to you in hopes that it'll help you make a more informed decision about whether you want to add these pencils to your art collection. So, now the pencils work really well as a regular colored pencil. They do not smudge. I had no experience of that at all. The colors are okay on the saturation. I mean, this was a set that I had pros about, I had cons about, and then I had some middle of the road opinions. So if I just had to kind of sum it up and put it in a nutshell as we start to look at some of the paintings that I did with the pencils, I would say, again, the lids are semi-soft. They're going to glaze well. The colors mixed pretty cleanly. So I did a painting where the last video to go up on the channel, a tutorial where I did a different version of a banana. And I found that I'm actually painting bananas in a series. And if you don't know what that is, go ahead and Google it. But it's basically where you pick an object or an object that you're painting over and over, and you're doing it in different ways. And this is actually the second banana tutorial that has gone up on the channel. Now, this one was done in a mixed media form, but it's on watercolor paper, 140-pound watercolor paper. The original layer was done with the watercolor pencils. The second layer was done with Master's Touch watercolor paints. And then I went back to do the third layer and enhancements with the watercolor pencils in dry form. I was able to achieve really great detail. The pencils aren't super saturated on the first layer, I'll be honest. They do offer pretty moderate pigmentation, and that's one of the middle of the road opinions that I have about it. You know, they're not super saturated, but they're not completely dull either. And the more you layer them, the more color, saturation, depth, and vibrancy that you can get. So you may need to layer and work with them a little bit more than normal. However, it will pay off, because as you can see here, I got some really saturated colors, although this is mixed media, and it did have watercolor paints in it. So the second, or another image that I painted, or painting that I painted with them, and this is just straight pencils. This is not mixed media. This is on, again, 140-pound watercolor paper. And I'm not sure if I said this was mixed media, but this is 140-pound watercolor paper as well. And I basically just sketched out a mango with a knife on a cutting board. And I laid down the first layer with the pencils, dispersed it with water. The pigment actually dispersed really well in water. The lines and the colors are not hard to dissolve, so you don't have to do a lot of scrubbing on the paper. However, one of those middle of the road things that I'm not really crazy about, and it really just depends on what you're trying to do, is that the colors or the pencils will lift. And not all the time when you want them to, especially as you're layering, if you use too much water at all. Now, that's a good thing if you're trying to lift. It's not a good thing if you're not trying to lift. So that's kind of one of those things where you really have to get to know the product, get to know the pencil that you're using, so that you can become experienced with how much water to use. But I tell you guys all the time, when you're using watercolor pencils, you want to try to use a synthetic brush. I always recommend Golden Teclon or an acrylic brush with a pretty semi-hard bristle that's going to help you push that pigmentation around, but not destroy the paper at the same time, especially if you're using an acrylic brush. Again, now here, colors mix really cleanly. Colors mix really cleanly here too. Now on this painting, I actually used one of the greens that came in the set. However, on the banana here, I mixed that green. There were 3 watercolor pencils used in this composition. That was a yellow, a brown, and a blue. The yellow and the blue was used to mix to make the green. And as you can see, it gave me a beautiful vibrancy of really clean green. They mix really well dry. They actually mix really well when they're wet. And I did not notice them mixing to make mud. The mixture was actually vibrant and you could tell what the color was without any issue at all. And of course, the other painting that I did, or the very first one that I did with the pencils, was this little miniature sketch of a cupcake. And I actually did this following a tutorial, Lindsay the Fruit Crafter. I just wanted something easy to paint. I didn't really want to think about it too much. It was the first time out the gates trying the pencils. And again, this is just a straightforward pencil artwork, but this is actually on mixed media paper. As you can see, between the two, I think the pencils perform pretty well on mixed media and watercolor paper for all intents and purposes. With all that said, let's talk about some things that I did not necessarily like about the pencils. Of course, I do not like the fact that there is no light fast information provided. I have not done any light fast testing, so I can't really offer an opinion on whether they are going to be. Of course, any artwork that you're not sure about, it's always suggested that you frame it under glass with a mat to try to help it last longer. But I doubt you can expect these painting done with these pencils to last 100+ years. I just don't think that they are that light fast, with this being a craft brand. And regardless of the 10 saying that they're artist grade, again, at best, this is definitely a student grade of product. I think the entire line of Master's Touch Fine Art Studio at best is student grade. That's not taking anything away from the way the products actually perform. I like the paints. I actually like the pencils. Okay, so other than no light fast information, the color barrels do not actually match the swatch. That was another thing that I was sort of disappointed with, because with pencils, I kind of like it when you can just look at the barrel, look at the lid, tell what you're using. But that's definitely not the case. I'll show you an example of what I mean. Like, for instance, number 6, this light brown. If you look at the barrel, the barrel swatch does not correspond to the actual pigment laid down from the lid at all. So it is definitely my suggestion, without any doubts, swatch the pencils if you're going to get them. If you're not going to label them so that you can keep up with the color name, be sure to keep them in order as well, because if they fall out of order, it may be hard to identify a color, unless in all honesty, you just don't care and you're going to eyeball it and use the pencils based on what color you see and you deem best. So let's see, was there anything else that I didn't care much about? Oh yes, the pencils were not manufactured that great, my set anyway. There are a few of them in here where the varnish or the finishing on the pencil wasn't complete, and it left like a textured, rough feeling on the end where the color swatch is. Almost like, you know how when you spray paint something and it's on like a textured wall? That's sort of what it feels like. So the barrels are not completely smooth. And I'm not sure if that's a defect in all of the pencils or if that was just a regular defect in my set. However, that did not hinder the actual performance of the pencils. But I did want to throw that out there so you'll have that information and you would know it. The white pencil, something else I didn't care too much for, is not all that opaque. It's okay for pulling out mid-tones, but beyond that, it's pretty much useless in my opinion. It's okay for lightening up colors. You can add it in a little bit, but it's not going to do a super job, so I just don't want you guys to expect that. However, the black is pretty opaque, so you get a pretty lackluster white and you get a really opaque black. So I think that's really good. The colors, for all intents and purposes, are pretty transparent, semi-transparent. They do tend to get a bit opaque as they are layered. Of course, here I did not do an opacity test on the actual color swatch, which I typically do, but I was sure to kind of pay attention to that as I was going along in the paintings. So let's see here. And some of the colors look the same. That would probably be the last big con that I have about the pencils. Although there is 48 pencils, it's a pretty comprehensive set. Some of the colors do look a little samey duplicated to me. Like for instance, the deep yellow and the medium yellow are not that much off. The khaki actually kind of reminds me of the medium yellow, and the apricot sort of looks like just a whitened down version of the khaki. Same thing here in the shades of reds. You got a vermilion, a red, and a deep red, which really aren't that far off from each other. Now, there's a pretty comprehensive range of greens here. For all intents and purposes, they're okay. They do have some similarities in the color range, but you can see a difference between them. And I was actually pretty surprised to see a set with so many greens in it. But that's a good thing, because the greens and the more earthier tones help lend to more landscape type of paintings. And the brights are bright enough for you to do your florals and your botanicals. So you can do several different type of paintings if you decided to add these pencils to your art supply collection. So let's talk about price of the pencils really quickly. I did not take time to try to source these pencils from any other place than Hobby Lobby. With it being their house brand, I do believe that is going to be the place that you get the best price on it. Now, if you've heard me talk about Master's Touch before, you've heard me say over and over again that Hobby Lobby always, as far as I know, 100% of the time that I've ever seen it, runs a 50% off special on their house brand of products. So the regular price of, or the retail suggested price of these watercolor pencils, if I'm not mistaken, is 60 bucks. You get them half off, so you pay $29.99 for them. And I don't think that's too terrible of a price for 48 pencils that perform pretty decently as a student grade pencil. Now, you cannot use their 40% coupon off on it because it's already marked 50% off. But again, you can use a pencil wet or dry. Highly pigmented, maybe not, but definitely moderately pigmented enough for you to do what you need to do. So yeah, 30 bucks for the complete 48 color set. Not a bad bit, not a bad buy. Okay, so do I recommend the pencils? Now, here's where things get a little complicated, because that's a two-part question, yes and no. And as I'm talking about that, we're going to take a look at some comparisons of these pencils to some other student grade pencils, so that I'll be able to explain exactly why I'm saying what I'm saying. Let's look at the pencils, first of all, in comparison to one of the student grade pencils that we've done in this particular swatch book, which are the Faber-Castell Gold Faber watercolor pencils. Now, if I had to pick between the two, hands down, I would pick the Faber-Castell. Couple of reasons. One, I'm going to believe that they're more light fast because they come from Faber-Castell. And I take their word that they say that those are light fast. Not that Master's Touch is making that claim, but that's one of the reasons I would pick Gold Faber over Master's Touch. Number two, I think that the Gold Fabers are more saturated in color. There's not a huge color shift from wet to dry with the Gold Faber. I'll be honest, there's not a huge color shift from wet to dry with the Master's Touch either. So they kind of match up in that particular aspect. Now, Gold Faber does have 48 colors. I only had the 24 color set, so I haven't completed that 48 color set, so I can't compare all of the colors, but definitely hands down, I just think that the Faber-Castell would be a better product. Now, if you were going to put them up against some other products here, for instance, the Fine Touch. The Fine Touch is actually Hobby Lobby's second house brand, and I want to see if I can get those both in the screen there so you can see it. Now, this to me would be sort of like the ultimate comparison, because you got the two house brands against each other. And I don't even really have to say anything. You can see the difference. I felt the same way about the paints. I felt like the Master Touch paints were worlds above the Fine Touch. I feel the same way here. The pencils are world above the Fine Touch, more saturated. with color, more pigmented. I think that they dispersed better when the water hits them. There are no color names or light fast information provided for these pencils at all. I just had to come up with a numbering system for them. There isn't as huge of a range of pencils, I don't believe, for the fine touch as it is for the Master's Touch. Don't quote me on that, but I do believe the largest pack of watercolor pencils that I saw for the fine touch was 24 versus 48 for Master's Touch. So you definitely get a larger selection of colors. But for all reasons, Master's Touch win against the fine touch for me. Then we're going to take a look at like pen to paper, which is another craft brand carried by Books A Million. Here, if I had to choose, I'm going to choose the fine touch again. I feel like the colors are more saturated. And I do get color names here. Although I think the barrels of the pencils were finished better with the pen to paper watercolor pencils. Now we're going to kind of take a look against Artist Loft watercolor pencils, which is Michael's house brand. Now here I'm a little conflicted because you guys know, and you've heard me say several times before, as far as a craft brand of watercolor pencils go, I was kind of fond of Artist Loft. If I had to compare the two and choose between one, I really don't think I could. I think they're kind of comparable, pretty much straight down the line in a lot of aspects. I wouldn't actually be surprised if it's the same company producing both of the pencils. Again, don't quote me on that. I just see a lot of similarities in the pencils, other than the fact that Master's Touch, you're going to get a larger range of pencils. You get 48 for their complete watercolor pencil range. With Artist Loft, I do believe the largest watercolor pencil set you can get is 24. So if for that reason only, I would probably go with the Master's Touch. But don't sleep on Artist Loft. I think these pencils are really well, so I would kind of pit them up against each other as being pretty much equal. Then you look at something like Faber-Castell Eco Grip pencils, which is their classic line in the red box, or Royal and Langnickel Essential 24 watercolor pencils, which is their largest set. Now, if I had to choose, I would choose Master's Touch over Royal and Langnickel, hands down. I am really not a big fan of Royal and Langnickel pencils. You do see me using them in paintings, but that's only because I'm trying to use them up. But I'm not the hugest fan, and I really wouldn't recommend them. The Eco Grip pencils, actually, I think the Master's Touch actually kind of have those beat, although they don't beat the student grade of Gold Faber pencils. And yeah, I won't compare them against Caran d'Ache because that's a professional grade of pencil, and I don't think that comparison would be fair. So overall, yes, I would recommend the pencils to a beginner, someone just starting out with watercolor pencils for the first time, someone that has supplies, has good pencils, and just looking for a good craft brand to add to their selection, or maybe something to throw into their travel bag in order to use to travel with. All those reasons, yes, I would recommend the pencils. However, if you are a super art head, if you are someone that's really into, you know, super higher student grade performing supplies or professional grade supplies, and of course, these won't be the pencil for you at all. I like them. I think they're good. I think they're okay. I don't think that everybody is going to like them, and I'm trying to think of it from a wider range of artists' perspectives here. But I would give them as a gift. I would give them as a first set of watercolor pencils to someone, because I don't think it's going to turn them off. I think they're going to enjoy using them. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have on the pencils, guys. This was not going to be, I hope this wasn't too long of a review. If you found any of the information useful or helpful to whether you're going to add these to your art supply collection, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. I would really, really appreciate it. Go ahead and subscribe. If you watch the videos, then evidently there's something that you like about them. So please go ahead and subscribe so you can keep up with other content that's going up on the channel. You never know what you'll find, what you'll like. Use the comment section. I would love to talk to you guys and converse. Let me know what you think about the pencils. If you have them, have you used them? What was your experience like? Or whether or not this video is making you lean towards buying the pencils for yourself for the first time. Don't forget to share the video. Sharing is caring, and you never know, there may be somebody out there that will find this information useful and just do not know about the channel. Even if it's a small following, please go ahead, hit that share button and share the video so that we can help the channel grow. I would really, really appreciate that. And remember, as I tell you guys at the end of every single video, just keep painting.